Hello, my name is Danny Engmark. I am the Wilderness Program Director here at Camp Manito-wish YMCA. Thank you for joining me here for the Expeditionary Information webinar. The main reasons for me to host this kind of presentation are really three. So one, to clarify any assumptions that might have been made about what expos are, what these trips entail. I'd like to relay some information about what it looks like to go on an expeditionary level trip, and also to set some expectations. So if you are here because you're interested in the Expo trip for 2016, or just interested in hearing more about it, so these Expo trips are 45-day trips, and these are wilderness travel trips that go backpacking, sea kayaking, or canoeing for 45 days. So these are big trips, and we're really thrilled that we're able to offer a trip of this caliber. So I hope that this shines some light into what it looks like to be out there for this long on a trip with Manito-wish. So we're going to cover why are we going on these trips? Why do we offer these trips? We're going to cover some expectations, both from expectations of what we have for the participants and also what you can expect from our trip leaders. We'll go a little bit into the history of each of these trips before delving into the trip descriptions themselves. So we'll go through and I'll show you some photos from each three of locations that we go to in the three disciplines. We'll then move into the schedules for the 2016 summer and go into some specifics about what these trips look like, as well as what you know and can be confident in that our staff will be offering to your kids in terms of how we train them and certifications that they have. And then finally, we will go into the cost. What does it actually cost to send these trips out, and some financial information about what's available to help pay for this kind of trip. So let's get started. So let's talk a little bit about why. So we've got these really big 45-day expeditions that we offer. Why would one want to go on this, and why should one go on this, as well as maybe why shouldn't one go on this? So an expeditionary level trip is designed to challenge each individual in an extremely remote environment and over an extended period of time. And through this wilderness travel, we grow by the mission and vision of what Camp Manito-wish has. So our mission at Camp Manito-wish is to enrich the character and leadership development of each person who has a Manito-wish experience by challenging them to grow in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and in favor with one another. The vision here at Manito-wish is the Manito-wish experience develops confident, responsible, and enlightened leaders who will improve the world in which they live. We firmly believe that through wilderness travel and through specifically the curriculum that we have designed, that we are creating leaders within the Manito-wish community and outside of it, who really go on to be exceptional people. So these trips, specifically the expeditionary level trip, focuses very strongly on leadership progression in order to develop potential staff members for us in the future. So this conversion is around 50% of Expo participants will end up on staff, either the following year or in the future from there, as opposed to our advanced level, which are our 30-day trips. Those folks, only about 8%, if that's the longest trip they go on, about 8% of those folks will end up on staff. So we really pride ourselves on the skills that we're passing along and on the leadership development that happens while they're out there. Why? The last reason, there are many reasons of why to go on an Expo, but this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to travel through some incredibly remote environments. I can tell you personally that having led an expeditionary level trip, that these environments are extreme and they are absolutely awe-inspiring, and that it's a privilege for us to be able to go and to take groups out to the places that we see. So we'll move on to expectations here. These, as I said before, these trips are a big deal. They're not only long and demanding in the length of time that one is out on any of these trips, but also in the caliber and the challenge that is presented, not only by the environment, but also by our leaders. So we've got a lot of expectations in terms of what to look forward to while going out there for this period of time. We expect our participants to have attained previous wilderness tripping skills necessary to begin a trip with competency in the technical skills needed for an expo. So an invitation to an expo means that you should already have those tripping skills. If you received an invitation, it means that we are confident in your ability to go out and to have the backcountry skills necessary to provide yourself with a safe experience. This does not mean that you are required to have backpacked, canoed, or kayaked on any of your previous trips in order to choose that respective discipline at the expo level. The backcountry skills and wilderness skills needed for all these trips across the board are very common, and the specialized skills necessary for each one we are able to teach you once you get here onto camp property. So don't worry too much. If you want to go backpacking, you've never gone backpacking before, if you've been invited to an expeditionary level trip, we'll teach you the skills and how to get you there. We expect our participants to be in good physical and mental health to partake on a trip of this magnitude. You cannot come onto this trip in order to become physically or mentally fit. These trips, again, are no small deal. And we need folks to come out here who are ready and willing to put the work in to make it a rewarding experience. We need our participants to understand that this trip will focus on character and leadership development as a key component of its mission, and the participants need to work to improve themselves and the group in these areas. This is a common misconception about these trips. They're meant to delve very deep into the leadership and character development. These are not senior trips or vacations by any means. They're incredible experiences, but they are incredibly hard work as well. We expect our participants to know, understand, accept, and continue to minimize the risks that are associated with backcountry travel. Risks increase exponentially at the expo level. It's because of the remoteness of the locations, the length of time, and the physical and mental endurance that's required to be out in remote settings with such a small group of individuals. We also expect our participants to be willing and able to work in small group settings in remote areas for 45 days. Ideal that you are part of the team will never be more apparent than it is when you're out with a group of 5 to 7 other folks, and you will not be able to ignore problems over the course of 45 days. So being willing to talk about issues that arise and to help create a cohesive and collaborative atmosphere is really, really important. We expect our participants to take on leadership roles and responsibilities throughout the trip. This trip will be the participants' trip. That comes from the routes of travel to the camping locations to making meals and also helping to make decisions on how their trip is going to look throughout the entire 45 days. Over the course of the trip, more and more leadership will be placed upon the participants, with our leaders being there as a safety and as a backup to help facilitate and teach skills that they need to teach. But by the end of this trip will be yours, so keep that in mind. We also expect our participants to know and abide by Camp Manito-wish policies. That goes for while they're here in camp getting ready and while they're here in camp pack cleaning all of their things afterwards. This goes to while they're en route to and from camp and while they're out on their trip. This is not only is this a high expectations trip, but it is held in incredibly high regards by everyone here at camp. Summer camp participants really idolize Expo participants. You will be the oldest kids here in camp going on the longest trip. Administrative staff will be looking for maturity and a really strong work ethic, and this especially goes for making hiring decisions in the future or the following year even. So to help us make sure that the expectations are very clear. If you received an Expo invite, you should have also received some essay questions that you'll need to answer as part of your registration process. So this essay is not necessarily due at the time that you register, but must be submitted to the Wilderness Program Director, and my email will be at the end of this presentation, within 4 weeks of your enrollment. These essays really help our leaders to understand where you're coming from, why you're going on this trip, and what to expect of you. And it also serves as an opportunity for you to really clarify why you want to go on this trip and why you think that this is going to be really important for your development. So going into the expectations of our leaders. So we expect, and you can expect our leaders to have certifications and training that is not only dictated by Camp Manito-wish YMCA standards, but also by the American Camping Association standards. We are an accredited ACA camp, so all of our staff, and especially these expeditionary-level trip leaders, will have lifeguard certifications, will have gone through a full staff training, and will be at a minimum medically certified as a wilderness first responder. You can expect our leaders to be in good physical and mental health in order to partake in a trip of this magnitude. You can expect our leaders to work to develop each participant's leadership abilities and to strengthen their character intentionally. Our leaders can be expected to manage risks in an appropriate manner and at a level that does not knowingly jeopardize the well-being of themselves or of those in their group. Our leaders can be expected to be well-versed in working in a small group setting for an extended period of time. And you can expect our leaders to facilitate the transfer of leadership from themselves over to the participants in a relatively well thought out way, where sometimes our leaders go about this in a couple of different ways, but it usually culminates in handing this trip over to a collaborative leadership model, so that the participants are actually practicing being leader of the day, or sometimes leader of 3 days in a row. And last but certainly not least is that you can expect our leaders to abide by and enforce Camp Manito-wish policies while in camp, while en route to and from camp, and while they're out on their trips. So these expectations of our leaders go parallel with the expectations that we have from our participants. If everything goes well and everyone is all in and has the same expectations, then the growth that comes out of these trips is absolutely astounding. So real brief history of all 3 of the trips that we offer here at the expeditionary level. So our Expo Western, colloquially called the Alaskan, is a trip that has been running since 2002. It's a very popular trip, and we've basically sent out at least 2 every year to the same areas. The last few years, we've actually had between 3 and 4 Alaskan backpacking trips go out all at once every summer. No 2 trips have been exactly the same. These areas that we go to are incredibly diverse and have so many different possibilities, which is a really beautiful aspect of it. Our Expo Canuck has been going since the early 1970s. It's our longest running expeditionary level trip. And the location has changed slightly, but we are currently running that trip still in northern Canada. The Expo Mariner has been a very popular trip as well, and started in 2008. So the first trip that we ran went to British Columbia, and then after some pretty difficult times getting permits and lots of hoops to jump through, we actually chose and now run this trip from and out of Juneau, and so in the Inside Passage. But it's a very popular trip. It's really unique, especially compared to the other trips that we run, and it's very, very beautiful. So here is a little brief, very brief schedule here. For our expos in 2016, they'll be arriving here on June 17th. They'll spend June 19th and 20th or the Expo Canucks will spend those days doing whitewater training on some rivers, either the Wolf River or the St. Croix River, right around here or within a day's distance of driving. On June 22nd, all of our expos will depart camp, and they'll head on their way. By June 24th, all of our trips will be out on trail, and we'll be out there for 45 days until August 6th or 7th, depending on their pickup times and how they've arranged their logistics. Those trips will then come off trail, and they'll usually have a couple of days in transit before getting here back to camp. So by August 8th, all of our trips will have returned back to camp. August 10th will be the paddle in and welcome home celebration, which includes a traditional paddle in and hike in, as well as a banquet dinner and then slideshows, and family and friends are invited to this event. If you do register, then we'll send out a lot more information on that once spring and summer arrive. And then August 11th, participants from the expos will leave, and they'll head back home after having their experiences out in the wilderness for a month and a half. Some little descriptions of the areas here too. I guess we'll start with the Expo Western backpacking trip. So this trip goes to Gates of the Arctic National Park and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This is in the Brooks Range of Alaska. So this is the high alpine and Arctic tundra landscape. The elevation ranges between 3,000 to 7,000 feet. So in the scheme of mountains, the elevation is not incredibly high, but you do need to remember that when you're down in a valley, you're essentially starting only a little bit above sea level. So you can see the yellow highlighted area here in northern Alaska, Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve, and then just to the east of that is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. We've been sending about 2 groups to the refuge every summer, and it's a pretty large privilege to be able to do that and to travel through there. So these folks, it's really open terrain. These mountains are very old and are pretty broken down. So there's a lot of scree, which is actually the material that they're standing on right now, which are very small rocks because of how broken down these rocks and mountains are. The river valleys are wide, very, very wide. You can often see sometimes days in advance of where you're heading because of how big it is up there, and everything is just exponentially larger. Some of the wildlife that these folks might see would be grizzly bears, sometimes black bears, moose, wolves, grayling, and trout. The fishing up there is incredible. Some of our groups actually have the opportunity to see the caribou migration towards the later end of the summer as well. Where these trips go, there are no trails. So they are traveling based on their mapping compass skills and as well as the landmarks around them. Well, you can see for a really long time it is sometimes challenging terrain to navigate through, so they will hone their navigation skills and be experts by the time that they leave this place. So it's pretty wild. These folks do not have the ability to bring all their food with them, so they are resupplied with food. They have 4 rations of food, which means that they'll have 3 food resupplies that are most often brought to them by a float plane like this. They travel from one location to another one where the float plane will come in and drop their food and then take their trash, and then they'll be on their way again. This is a photo of what's called a tundra tarp. As you may have heard, the mosquitoes and the bugs up in northern Alaska can be pretty intense at times. And so we provide a tundra tarp like this as the kitchen for these trips. So these folks will set this up at most of their campsites, unless it's no bug day, and will cook inside. And so it's a big mesh opening, and that'll be their kitchen. We have some significant river crossings that happen up there as well. This is an example of these groups having analyzed the river, deeming it safe to cross, and then going into their formation to safely cross this river. And of course, the relationships that people make out on these trips are absolutely phenomenal. And we have our Canuck Canoeing Expo. So this trip goes to, we're looking at sometimes northern Saskatchewan and none of it. These trips typically end in Baker Lake, which is a community, and there's an airport up there, and so our trips generally all congregate there at the end of their trips. The landscape is very, very open. You're oftentimes the tallest thing around. So they're above the tree line, large open skies. They'll have high bluffs on rivers, large white water, so sometimes some pretty big water. And some of the wildlife that they'll see would be grizzly bears, black bears, moose, wolf, muskoxen, caribou, northern pike, Arctic char, grayling, and trout. So lots of things happening up there. This is an example of a typical campsite. Because of the this trip and all of our expos are in grizzly bear territory, which means that we up the precautions that we take while out there. So they set up their camp in ways that are strategic in terms of keeping the smells away from their sleeping areas, cooking in a completely different area that is away from where they're going to be spending the rest of their time, so that it dramatically reduces the risk that they'll have an encounter. And the fishing is incredible, of course. Again, this is the a trip that does run whitewater. The boats that these folks are paddling in this photo are pack boats. So our canoes that we bring on this trip, since they have to fly into their remote locations, actually have the ability to be broken down and put into a bag so that they can fly more easily with them. So this boat is fully constructed with spray skirts, and they've analyzed this set of whitewater and have deemed it appropriate with a plan to paddle it and run this set. Looks like they're having a great time. Portages are much like portages in many other realms. These folks are portaging on a watershed portage, which means that they're going from one system of water to a completely different system of water. And they get to see a lot of cool things along the way. And last but certainly not least, we have the Expo Mariner Sea Kayaking, which is sometimes colloquially called the Pacific Sea Kayaking trip. So these folks will paddle in southeast Alaska for 45 days in the Inside Passage. So as you see from this map, they usually leave from Juneau, and they'll do some loops. They'll go down the passage and then come back up the passage in a variety of ways so they see as much of it as possible. These waters are coastal waters of the Inside Passage. They follow shorelines, and they paddle sometimes upriver into glacial valleys. There is big open water crossings and huge mountain views. They'll see glaciers and icebergs. They'll sometimes encounter killer whales, humpback whales, seals, brown bears, black bears, bald eagles, dolphins, salmon, trout, and crab, as well as a lot of other different types of wildlife present in the tidal pools that they'll encounter. This is an incredibly unique environment. This is the only sea kayaking trip that we run on the ocean, so that's on salt water. So these folks will be resupplied with food twice during the trip, so they have 3 rations. And much like our backpackers, they will camp near a fresh water source every night, so that they always have the ability to drink fresh water. Some examples of typical campsites in the Inside Passage. It's very, very common for these trips to see whales regularly. It's a pretty thrilling and big privilege to be able to see these huge creatures. These folks, because they are on the ocean, they have to strategically camp and sometimes carry their things long distances because of the tides as well. So this is them feeling pretty strong and burly after bringing their things back to where they're going to be camping for the night, so they make sure they're out of the way of the tides as they come in or go out. And they get to see a lot of really wild things. So we've got our staff training to talk about. Our staff training in 2016 is going to be from June 2nd until June 12th. This includes a 5-day training trip. This training trip is designed specifically to mimic what a daily trip routine would look like out on trail. So these backpackers, they go to the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness. The canoeists will go into the immediate area and also to a river, sometimes the St. Croix River or sometimes the Wolf River, to practice their whitewater paddling skills. And our kayakers will spend their time in the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore to practice their sea kayaking skills. You can expect all of our leaders to have certifications of the following. Everyone will be at very least medically certified as a wilderness first responder. They'll also have CPR, and our trip leaders will all have wilderness water safety and or lifeguard training certification. For trip-specific trainings, our canoeists will have an ACA Whitewater Safety Level 3 certification, which is oftentimes a swiftwater rescue certification. Our kayakers will have an ACA Coastal Sea Kayaking Level 3 or 4 certification before leading this caliber of trip. You can expect our leaders to, for there to be 2 of them. For our expos, these trips are co-led. So that means that for every group, which is no larger than 5 people, 5 participants per group, you'll have 2 leaders of the same gender. They are mentally and physically capable and very prepared, and they're chosen based on their judgment, their proven leadership, and outside experiences, among many other things. We choose the best possible staff to lead these trips. We have high expectations of what these trips look like and of the outcomes that we want. We do not take them lightly. We do sometimes hire leaders to Manito-wish that are new, that have not been to Manito-wish before, but they are expected to have had a very similar progression and a similar background of experience to what Manito-wish offers its other trip leaders. We generally pair new Manito-wish or leaders that are new to Manito-wish with staff members that are more familiar with our curriculum in order to create a some more continuity with the outcomes that we're getting. So thank you for your time, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me. My email is dani.engmark@manitowish.org, which is DANI.engmark@manito-wish.org. My phone number is 715-385-2312. You can ask for Dani Engmark, or you can ask for the Wilderness Program Director for any questions that may have arisen after seeing this, this slideshow. So please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm thrilled that you're interested in coming on an expeditionary-level trip. They are wonderful, wonderful trips. So the last thing before I let you all go to cover is the cost for these trips for this coming summer. So we have 2 different aspects of the cost and how we pay for the Expo level trips. We have an actual fee, which is the fee that it actually costs us to send an individual out for a trip of this length. And then we have an adjusted fee, and that fee is based upon the funds that we have allocated in order to support the outcomes that we see. We get so many wonderful staff members who come off of these trips, so we subsidize the cost of these trips pretty substantially, and we believe that it's worth it. So for our the actual fee for the Expeditionary Canuck is $15,380 with an adjusted fee of $10,590. For the Expeditionary Mariner, which is our sea kayaking trip, the actual fee is $15,800 with an adjusted fee of $10,890. For our Expo backpacking trip, our actual fee is $14,780 with an adjusted fee of $10,600. We understand that these prices are pretty substantial, but the last thing we want is for somebody to not pursue this type of trip. If they really want to go, then we don't want the financial aspects of coming on a trip like this to be a factor at all. So we have other financial assistance built in, and one of those is called a campership, which is a scholarship fund that we have allocated. Last year we gave about $350,000 in camperships out to help support folks coming to camp who needed a little bit of assistance. That sometimes ranges anywhere from helping to purchase the gear that's required to go on these trips to providing a full scholarship to give someone the opportunities that they would not otherwise have. So if you have questions about the financial aspects of things, please, again, don't hesitate to contact me. We don't want that to be an obstacle in coming to camp in 2016. So again, thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Thank you very much.